My name is Will Chandler, handle of Guardian Fury, name for the YouTube. I was making my first video. I've been around a bit watching a lot of the Jehovah's Witness community, and myself, I just wanted to add my voice to it. Finally, it's the first video I've ever made, and I'm just holding this thing. So bear with me because it's not going to be not exactly a pro or anything like that. I was from my earliest memories had to do with being a Jehovah's Witness, being raised as one. My mother uh, found the cult when she was fairly fairly soon after I had been born, and by the time I was 2, she had uh, taken myself and my sister, my older sister, and left my non-believing father and moved, 600 miles away, and to get away from him and expecting the end of the world and all that fun stuff. So I can directly speak to the Jehovah's Witnesses breaking up families and actively trying to hide the children and not let the non-believing spouse have access to them, because that's the life that I lived from a very early age. Um, I might be jumping all over the place. I've got a little bit of a timeline written out here that I'm going to be trying to access the notes, try to stay online. So at the age of 2, I've got it that my mother leaves for the cult. Uh, my first memories actually of my father is of him pulling up where we were staying and me going inside to tell my mother that some man was here, so I didn't remember him. Of course, what happened is that at the age of 5, when I was 5, my mother married a quite a bit younger Jehovah's Witness that was kind of ready-made for him, and so here she has a couple kids already, and has been convinced that the cult is the truth, has been convinced of that lie, and they have convinced her to leave my father uh, for spiritual reasons, and that he's the devil incarnate, which is what I was taught growing up. Um, and a few years later, she's married off to this nice, respectable Jehovah's Witness man, who, from the ages of 5 until I was 15, was raping and molesting me sexually, physical abuse, name it. They got, run the gambit, pick any type of abuse, and that man perpetrated it all. And kind of skipping around a little bit, but just want to. That's probably one of the main things I want to get my voice on is uh, the astoundingly huge numbers of pedophiles that are abusing children. And I knew of quite a few other children that were being or had been molested while I was growing up. I can think of at least 10 off the top of my head right now. So to try to get back on track a little bit, the abuse began. Then when I finally did expose it, when I brought it up, told told my mother about it. Then we went and had a nice elders chat with the elders, where I distinctly remember, uh, and this is by the time I brought it up, I was, I'll say, 14, I believe, and no, I was 13. I was 13 years old when I sit in front of the elders with him, with my perpetrator, my stepfather, sitting there, and I'm having to tell them about it. And I distinctly remember clamming up a bit, not saying much, holding back a lot of details, holding back a huge amount of the abuse because it felt like they were looking to get me in trouble. I was very naive, as most are, about uh, the nature of some of these judicial committees that meet, and I was naive uh, to the victims often being the ones also being accused of wrongdoing and punished. But something in me, call it what you will, um, I could tell that if I wasn't careful in what I said, that I was also going to get in trouble. And so, fast forward a little bit. Um, he was, of course, a ministerial servant, and he was disfellowship for has got to be near a record of how short amount of time that this man was disfellowship for. And then my mother, my birth mother, was told that she needed to go back to him because they had separated for a little while, for a few months, and after a few months had passed, and the elders figured he had been punished enough. My mother was told that she needed to reconcile the marriage and get the family back together, and everything would be great. And of course, um, since in her mind they spoke for God, she agreed, and she brought her children uh, back to the man that had been abusing at least me, and there is evidence that he also abused my older sister and possibly my younger half sister also, which would be his biological daughter. And so it boggles my mind. I even asked my mother this question at one point: how could get back in the bed with a man that had been raping her son? I to this day I don't understand it. Uh, never will. It's mind-boggling that she, and of course my mother, is still fully indoctrinated Jehovah's Witness to this day, no matter what. Um, she's toes the line and is convinced. Um, so the abuse continued until finally another year and a half later, she finally realizes how foolish she's been, just in regard to staying with my stepfather. And so one day she turns the wrong way. We're getting ready to go to a meeting, I believe, and instead of taking a left on the highway, she takes a right. And we left with the clothes on our back, and um, she left him, and actually she got in trouble. Um, they didn't like disfellowship her because it was it's kind of one of those situations where it was actually like we moved 1,000 at least 1,500 miles away, 2,000 miles away. I don't know. It's across the country. We moved back home to Maine at the time from Texas, and that's where we had grown up initially, and that's where she was from, up in Maine. And so we moved halfway across the country, and uh, so like her getting in trouble for leaving him didn't fully catch up to her in the Jehovah's Witness world. Although she definitely was marked. There was a stigma to being associated with her. I do distinctly remember that. So I'm going to add a lot more details. I remember from, like I said, for 10 years I suffered with the abuse of the sexual and physical abuse, and not knowing any better. Uh, after she had got back with, after she took us and put me back in a situation with living with my abuser, um, being a confused kid, at 14 years old, I realized that if I used myself, my body, as a bargaining chip, I could make the family situation better because he was quite abusive, verbally and emotionally uh, the, towards everyone, towards my mother and my sisters. And I finally started using myself as a bargaining chip, and to say, hey, if you don't treat her better, treat my sisters better, treat my mother right, then you're not gonna spend as much time with you. Let you have access to what you want. And so, as a 14-year-old, that was the only avenue I could see at the time of what I was, some way I was able to impact my family for the better. And it's funny. Years later, uh, one day, my mother, when I was talking to her, like, kind of questioningly thought back and said, it was weird, or sometimes after we're back together, after I went back to him, that it was weird that sometimes he would just get really nice and everything would get better for a little while. And I told her why, and of course she was horrified and apologized a million times over. But she's the one that set the situation up to begin with because of the cult that is the Jehovah's Witnesses. But it's my first video. It's all over the place, I know. I'm going to kind of get more organized. I couldn't find some of the notes I wanted, and I'll give you a detailed, in-depth story. Um, if you guys are interested, I'm not really sure. Um, but anyway, this is. I'm probably going to post this pretty quick because if I review it, I'm probably going to say it's completely horrible. And so let me know what I need to clarify if anyone watches this, and I'll try to make some better videos as I'm completely unprepared. I'm just making this because if I don't start, I never will. So, all right, thanks for watching, and y'all have a good one.